to the region, this conference mainly focuses on three themes: development, environment, and mountains. On day one, we began with a dissemination workshop on forest restoration and nature-based solutions, followed by the keynote speech by Sir Partha Das Gupta, where he talked about natural capital and the meaning of sustainable development. We then launched the reflection booklet, held the reflections panel, and shared the SANDEE Tracers survey results. On day two yesterday, we heard keynotes from Dr. Ruth Mazentik on the commons and transdisciplinary work, and also from Professor Bishwanath Paudel on agricultural bank lending in Nepal. We then had a series of panel and parallel sessions. Today we have a similar agenda to day two. We will begin with the keynote speech by Professor Adil Najam and conclude the group session with a vote of thanks. Following this, we will have a series of panel and parallel sessions in the different halls that we have assigned. To move forward with today's agenda and begin the keynote speech, I would now like to invite the moderator, Professor Jeffrey Vincent. Professor Vincent is Clarence F. Korstian Professor of Forest Economics and Management at Duke University, and has been associated with SANDEE since its inception as the Management Advisory Committee member, as an advisor, faculty at various workshops, and currently is serving as a SANDEE Steering Committee member. Professor Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manashri. Good morning. How are you all doing? Good, good. Day three of this incredible conference. I'm sure you've enjoyed and learned as much as I have. It's a bit overwhelming at times, seeing so many people that I haven't seen in years, and really gives a strong sense of how much SANDEE has grown, and in talking with you all, what the impact has been, the difference you've made in your careers. It's truly an honor to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, and I believe this is the final keynote of the program, right, Manashri? Okay, and our keynote speaker is Dr. Adil Najam, who is the president of the Worldwide Fund for Nature International, which, by the way, is the world's largest conservation organization. Also a professor at Boston University in the Pardee School of Global Studies, where he also served as the founding dean of that school. He's originally from Pakistan. He then earned a series of degrees from MIT, including his PhD. He then launched into a career that has spanned both the academic world and the world of policy and practice, as his positions at Boston University and WWF International indicate. His achievements and accomplishments, awards, are too numerous to list, okay? He would have no time to speak if I went through them all. Let me just simply say that he's twice been the recipient of among the highest awards that the government of Pakistan gives to civilians. So truly a distinguished scientist and leader of the global conservation community. When I asked Adil yesterday what I should say by way of introduction, he didn't say any of this. I mean, he's a humble person. He said, just simply say, I'm a friend of SANDEE. Okay, so Adil, I want to point that out. You are a friend of SANDEE, and indeed he has been. He has served as the chair of the SANDEE Management and Advisory Committee. He's previously been a keynote speaker at SANDEE events, and when he was the vice chancellor at the Lahore University School of Management Sciences, he hosted a SANDEE workshop there. And these are just a few examples of his unflagging support to SANDEE. So again, it's truly an honor, Adil, to welcome you to the stage, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Adil Najam to give the keynote.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, and so glad to see you all. I hope you're all awake. I thank you for coming early in the morning on the last day of the conference as the energy curve goes down. Let me just first see if this is working. I think it is. I think it is. We've been working with our friends on the AV to make sure the slides are readable. It is truly a great pleasure to be here. Not because I'm speaking, but the energy and the vitality of the 25th anniversary is really sort of catches on. So happy 25th. A round of applause for SANDEE and 25 yet again, because I still can't believe what is happening. My name is Adil Najam, as was mentioned. I'm originally from Pakistan, now working in the US at Boston University and with WWF. I am going to be spending the next few minutes, and then I hope to really have a conversation with you, because I want to learn from you. I'm going to throw out questions, not very many answers, and I'm going to try to take this to the global level, particularly in the context of global climate change, and seek your help in helping me and others conceptualize that back to the local and back from the local to the global, because, and this may not be appreciated by everyone, I think, yeah, we've messed up the slide again. Can we? Because the graphs will go wrong. Okay, let's see if it does. Remember when, yeah, forget about the top stuff. Yeah, more. Keep going. Too much. Stay. Thank you. And we'll just leave it there. Okay, please forget that. My apologies for this, but otherwise it just won't be readable. You'll see when the slides come. So I want to link to the global, and that's why I start with that picture. And as was mentioned there, I do happen to be the president of WWF, which I am extremely proud of. But I put this picture partly to say that I'm not speaking on behalf of WWF. I'm speaking as an academic. I'm speaking as a friend of SANDEE. But I did get advice from the Panda, and Panda is okay with everything that I am about to say, I think. But I wanted to have that freedom to be able to speak to colleagues in my own self, especially because I want to raise some things that may be new, including for myself. I want to start with 3 questions. I promise not to answer any of them, because then we will not have time to talk about anything if I had the answers. But they're the type of questions that I think we should think of as we think of the questions that we do work on. The first of those questions, and all of you and many of you work on climate, is this very simple idea of what is the climate telling us. The words there are chosen very carefully. I have worked along with colleagues here on the IPCC. I have had the privilege of writing chapters on that and being an author and so on and so forth, and science. But I'm not talking about right now what the science is telling us. I'm not talking about what the IPCC is telling us. I'm not talking about what the newspaper is telling us. I want you to think about what the climate outside that door is telling you. And this is central to my argument. Because what the climate is telling us requires us now to change, I think, how we respond with research, right? So I want us to think about what the climate is telling us, and the proposition there is very simple. There is not a single person in this room. There is not a single person in this room who has not experienced climate change. I'm making a big assertion. I think I can validate that claim, and that is different from 25 years ago when SANDEE started. So the contextual reality, my argument would be, has changed. The second question I want you to think about is something that I've been working and propagating for the last 12 years now, which is what does it mean to live in what I call the age of adaptation? When I started talking about the age of adaptation, my friends in the climate community thought I had lost my soul, and now it is kind of accepted wisdom, and this is adaptation as related to mitigation. And in a way, I'm talking to kindred souls because this group has been working on adaptation well before the mainstream climate people were really taking it as seriously, but I'll say something more about it. And the third question that I want you to think about as you listen to me is, how does climate change how we think about climate change? That's not a tongue twister. And what I'm suggesting is that the onset of actual climate change requires us, that's the knowledge challenge I have for myself where I seek your help, to rethink how we think about what it means to be working on climate change. And again, this is the wrong audience because many here have already been doing it. My argument is, how do we get that into the mainstream of what we are doing? So sorry for that little setup. There will be a bit of setup and then I will catch pace and hopefully stay on time. So if those are the three questions, I have a proposition to suggest. I have a proposition, simply one proposition to suggest, and the proposition is that the onset of climate change impacts and the arrival of the age of adaptation demands a reimagination of the logic of climate politics, climate policy, and climate research. Now, that's too many words ever to have on a screen, so let me make it easier for you to understand. What am I saying? First of all, what has changed? The climate impacts. Right? So climate change we've been talking about. I'm suggesting now that we actually have impacts outside our window, that is the change that is central. And that is what triggers what I'm calling the age of adaptation, which I will talk about. And that is what demands a reimagination of what? Of the politics, of policy, and research on the subject. Much of my work has really been on the first two P's, politics and policy. I will not go in there. My argument generally has been the politics is and will become more fractious. Policy is and will become more distracted. You've been seeing that in the COPs. I'm not going to repeat that because that's not here. What I want to focus here and seek your help on is the research. That what can we as knowledge brokers or knowledge producers do to help the world understand this new moment that we are in, right? So that's essentially the proposition that I will just keep repeating now for the next 30 minutes and act as if I know what I'm talking about, which I'm not. Everyone here is an expert on climate, so I don't need to do this, but just for clarity of language, let me just give a very brief sense of my understanding for this talk of the climate basics that you all know about. In terms of policy and action, there was one, then there was two, and now there are three, I would argue, and the third one is still, some would say to me, no, I'm wrong, and that is fine. We'll come to that in the Q&A. Essential parts of what this is about. So if you've been trying to guess what those pictures mean, I'm sure you are getting that already, but what they mean is, essentially, we began with the idea of mitigation. We are a smart species. Climate will happen. Joyshri will tell us what it will do, and we will listen to her and change our ways, and the sky shall be starry, and all shall be well. Right? Mitigation is what you do so that a problem does not come, the problem you are anticipating does not happen. Right? If the problem is running out of gas in a car, you put gas in because you've now mitigated that challenge. So mitigation is how climate policy has mostly been. And mitigation is essentially a carbon game. Right? This is why we feel left out. Because the focus has been mitigation, the entire language of mitigation policy has to be carbon. It should be carbon, because the essential issue is emissions. Emissions are mostly hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbon is mostly energy. That is why climate policy becomes mostly energy. What happens if you fail to mitigate? Right? And that is where my late friend Salimul Haq and others started pushing. Well, if you don't mitigate in time, then what you do is you have to adapt. Right? And that is adaptation. So adaptation, in my view, is the failure of mitigation, what you do in the failure of mitigation, but it is not the opposite of mitigation. Right? When you're adapting, you have to continue mitigating, otherwise you'll have to adapt more. The good news here, there isn't much good news in my presentation, but the good news here is that adaptation is our superpower. As a species, we are super adapters. It becomes cold, so Jeff wears a sweater. That's adaptation. There is rain, I get an umbrella. That's adaptation. So as a species, we are really good at it. The problem of climate policy is that the problem is being caused somewhere, the adaptation is needed somewhere else, and the umbrella costs money. So now the question is, who's going to pay for the umbrella? We can get an umbrella, but who's going to pay for it? That's the essence of adaptation policy in that sense. So adaptation is, what do you do to respond to the impacts when they come so that they don't affect you or affect you as much. We are good at it, but it's expensive, and that's where the policy problem is. The umbrella is a good metaphor. That old limerick, the rain, it raineth every day on just and unjust fella, but more upon the just because the unjust has his umbrella. Right? So it's a distribution justice problem there. We are now confronted in the age of impacts and adaptation with what I think is actually an actual third thing, not a form of adaptation, and that is, what if I don't have an umbrella? What if I fail to adapt? And that is what we are currently calling loss and damage. Right? Now the thing falls on me. Sometimes literally it's my roof, sometimes it's my home being swept away. And I will not go too much into it, but I'll argue here that these are three separate things. Mitigation policy is essentially innovation policy. You innovate to, and that's why the investments are very market-oriented. Adaptation policy very much looks like development policy. I'll argue on that before. That is why there's an opportunity in it. Loss and damage you really want to avert because it is like disaster relief. Because the best you can do is to come back after the earthquake, in other cases, flood in this case, and so on and so forth. So again, I hope I have at least my terminology right, and my apologies for being sort of slow and pedantic about it, but I wanted us to be on the same page. Very quickly going into sort of the climate policy, all of you know, this is life after Paris. Paris, as you know, here is the 2010 agreement that we all pretended was a great breakthrough. I did not believe it then. I certainly do not believe it now, but it has become this framework. After having actually, like Professor Dasgupta told us, we had actually failed. So this was an attempt to camouflage failure by throwing two sets of very important numbers. And then everyone ran after those numbers. The first of those numbers sounded really impressive at that time. Right? And that was this number. I used to ask my audiences what the number is, and they would start counting. But it's now become a smaller number. It's 100 billion. Right? And magically, out of thin air, somehow 100 billion would appear of monopoly money and would be spent on adaptation. Now, again, this is not the place to go into. Much of my work on this is, much of it was creative accounting of changing one number to another number, never really appeared, but we knew that. So it was monopoly money then, it is monopoly money now. They're still doing the same thing. The last COP had started talking about trillions. Because if you are going to lie so boldly that it is at least impressive. Right? So that number is less important. The other is a physical science number. So it becomes much more important. And that number was supposed to be 2 degrees, and then became 1.5 to 2, mostly because developing countries, small island states, vulnerable countries said by 2, we are already down. So half-heartedly 1.5 was attached, and this is that we will not let the global temperature exceed these things. You will see more on this, but the bottom line is this. There is no science in the world that I know, no science in the world that I know at this point which says you can at all get to 1.5. No way. I actually don't think there's any science left that will say that we will not exceed 2. The best we can hope for is we are going to overshoot 2, We're probably going to reach somewhere 3.5. I think that's what the Germans are now officially saying. And then if we are right, then we will bend the curve somehow. That's a lot of hope invested in this idea, but the science on 1.5 is very, very clear. You will see this in a minute. This is what I mean by what the climate is telling you outside. This is what I mean by the age of adaptation. If this is so, then climate impacts are not a thing to, it's not something that we want to delay or not encounter. It is a reality we have to plan for. It is a reality that the villagers, the communities you work for have to live for. With, right? And that's the challenge to researchers. Let me take back a few years ago, a number of years ago, I told myself, I'm a climate person like Joyshri and others, we talk in the future, we have these nice graphs like Al Gore has 2070, 2100 and so on and so forth, and they look real cool. But then I realized I stopped using any graph that was in the future or minimizing them, because when I put those graphs, I think my students and others start thinking as if we have time. As if we have till 2100 to do something, and my argument is that is not so. So that's why I want you to take back to everyone to a year that everyone in this room can remember. People remember 2020? Two big things happened in 2020. What happened in 2020? COVID. So you're exactly right, COVID. Two great diseases hit the world. One was COVID, the other was? Anyone? Anyone? Zoom. That other disease still hasn't left us. There is very little known benefit from that disease. The only thing good that happens is you can put these nice screens behind you when you're talking on Zoom. That is me teaching my sustainable development class during COVID. But I take you back to 2020, not to show you those colorful pictures, but to remind you of what else was happening in 2020. I've purposely chosen a year we can all remember. Some of you tweeted about the things you're going to see. Then you forgot. January of 2020, hottest January ever recorded since we've been recording temperature. February 20, second hottest February. March 2020, second hottest March ever recorded ever since we'd been recording global temperature. That's also when the COVID thing came in. April, second hottest. May, hottest ever recorded. June, hottest ever recorded. By this time, you lost interest. You were more interested in that jumping cat on Twitter than these news that were coming every month, right? Second hottest July. Second hottest August. Hottest September. Third hottest October. Hottest November. You got a little Christmas present in December, which was the 8th hottest. What is special about the screen you see? What's the most interesting message from the screen you see? Anyone, especially those who work on climate? Each of those numbers is now outdated. Each and every one of them has been broken since then. Right? That's, to me, the age of adaptation. That means the mental framework we have of what we are dealing with when we are dealing with climate change has changed. I'll be quick on these. I've been doing this at every talk I do, and I just pull up something on that day. So if you can read it, that tweet from me was on, actually I can walk with this thing, yeah. So that I had tweeted on the 29th of April, 2022, and this was literally on a subway train. I looked up on iPhone what was happening, and I tweeted nearly 1 billion people, yes, 1 billion, across South Asia are seeing temperatures of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, in some cases over 170 Fahrenheit today. This is 29th of April. No, that is not normal. Not for them, not anyone, not in the last week of April. We are South Asians, we can deal with 100. We often deal with 100. Not in April. Not for 1 billion people. Look at what's that. That's Jacobabad, that's Dadu, that's New Delhi, that's Ragnar, that's Varanasi, so these are big places, Jaipur. Right? So this is what I mean, what you're seeing outside the window. I was giving a talk in Pakistan, and this was in July, and I don't know if you remember July 2023. If you can see this graph, this line, this dotted line, that was the hottest day ever recorded on Earth up till that time, right? That dotted line. Then what happened was that on the 3rd of July, the record is broken. The 4th of July, it is broken again. 5th of July, it is equaled. 6th of July, it is broken again. 7th of July, we lose interest. And the whole month, every day was warmer for the planet than the hottest day ever recorded up till that time. Right? So I know I'm just throwing this, the point is made, but I keep throwing this. I was again pulling this, doing a talk in May at Oxford, and that was what was happening to the world in Oxford. In the world at that point, if you remember the summer of 24, think of where you were. If you were anywhere in Europe, you were going through a heat wave and so on and so forth. So just to continue that tradition, what's happening now, this is the latest data I could find. This is as of last Sunday. This is what the world looked on December 7, 2025. I'm sorry, this is a little delayed. Usually it's a 3-day delay, but because we are on a Sunday, they will update it on Monday. Right? The red doesn't mean, it's not as dangerous as it seems. What it means is how much above the global average the temperature is on that day. The way to understand this graph, and again, I'm just sort of throwing numbers at you, but this is a crowd that understands number. This is an important one. The good news here is this is not going to be as hot as the last year. That red line is 2025. The orange line is for every day, the global temperature for 2024, which was the hottest year ever. Right? So the good news is we won't be as hot as the hottest year, but look where it is in comparison to the dotted lines, which are the average. And depending on the base, the first average is 91 to 20, the second is 81 to 2010. The average keeps moving. Right? So there is no science that denies this or can deny this, that there is something happening outside in the environment that is actually changing. Right? So if you are still not buying my argument, the argument simply is that climate is no longer a future issue. I hope you can read this graph. Again, remember the 1.5 and the 2.5. Ever since we've been recording temperatures, what is happening to it? I hope the colors are clear. There's a clock going there. We are at 1936, 35. This is not projection. This is not prediction. This is actual recorded temperature, right? Global temperature. And you see it hugging 1.5 already in 2023. That doesn't mean we've crossed it because averages are calculated differently and so on and so forth. I'm belaboring the point, but some of you might be saying that's very fine, but Professor, I live in Kathmandu and the weather here was perfectly fine 2 days ago. I, in fact, enjoyed the nice weather, and that is true. So I've put the same data now on a global map, and you can choose whatever place you are interested in. Ever since we've had the temperature, the colors tell you how much above or below it is the global average for that place. Right? And again, you see the clock hitting there, and this is the story of what my and many of us have lived through in these years. Right? So that is my sort of very belabored way of saying that there is just a reality outside that window that is shouting at us that something has changed. And the question is whether we change it in our research. And you will see the words I have below are there for a reason. It is global, but it is very local. And just as we have often cribbed about the global not caring about the local, my worry is that the local is no longer caring about the global. And that is going to come back and hit us. Right? Professor Dasgupta started his presentation by talking about the biosphere. If you ignore it, nothing will happen to it, but something bad might happen to you. And that global and local thing is important. We've already argued, and I don't need to sort of do this more, 1.5 is not going to happen. Some here might say, what's 0.5 degrees between friends? More than that has changed since you woke up this morning. Right? But we are talking about global climate change. There are better people than me in this room who can talk about this. I'll give you just a snapshot without going into it from an already dated IPCC report on the global warming of 1.5. What is the difference? What is 1.5 between friends? Here is the difference. So for example, species loss doubles. That means not there's twice as much species loss, but what the species loss would be at 1.5, the differential is doubled at 2, right? Ecosystems, 1.86 times. That is ecosystems that actually change their biome, nature, and so on and so forth. So the difference when you're talking about global climate is in fact significant. Who faces that difference? Right? That difference is not felt at the global level. That is felt at a community level, at a community pond level, at a fisher's level in the Sundarbans. Right? That's where people say, well, something has changed. I don't know what. But I'm not getting the catch I was. And that is why mixing that global to the local becomes the challenge that it is for you. This brings me to the last sort of part of my presentation. I belabored it as much as I can, and I apologize for that. If I've made the argument that impacts are making a difference, if I've made the argument that we are now in the age of adaptation and well into the age of adaptation, then there may be an opportunity also in the age of adaptation. But there are also many challenges. So how does the age of adaptation of climate translates into things policy-wise that you and I work on? Let me give you some examples of what is here now and why it is important. There are many ways in this becomes important. I'll give you those examples, but the big point, if there is, I'm not an equation person, but if you really want one, that's the best I can come up with. Climate is much bigger than carbon dioxide. Climate is now too important to be left to climate people alone. In the age of mitigation, the essential language of climate policy is the carbon molecule. Everything eventually has to translate to it. In the age of impacts, the carbon molecule doesn't do much for you. In the middle of the flood, I can't play with the carbon molecule in any which way that changes the livelihood of the person who's just lost their home. That's what's concerning climate people. For 30 years, I've trained my students to be carbon managers. And now the problem has become bigger than carbon. Here are some ways in which that has happened. Let me just explore a few of this. This is where what you do becomes immediately relevant. But I think, and my colleagues can verify or not, the climate people are really struggling with this because the language we have developed, which is carbon accounting, you trade carbon, you reduce carbon, you count carbon, doesn't help you in the age of impacts, because the impacts are not about carbon, they're about food, they're about water. And so let me give you some examples. My favorite one, both because of WWF and because I was at Chitwan last week chasing tigers, which I did not see, but I did see a dolphin in the Naryani River, is nature. We forget. When the climate changes, it just doesn't change for our species. It changes for every other species. Not just the tigers, it changes for the trees, it changes for the crops, it changes for the deer. And nature does not wait. So if you think, imagine, here's a question, here's a classroom question. If I ask you for a picture that depicts nature and climate, what would you come up with? Or animals and climate, what would you come up with? The polar bear, right? My WWF colleagues love that. And I say that's the exact wrong picture. Because it kind of suggests the polar bear is sitting in the middle of the ocean on this ice slab waiting for Partha Dasgupta to come and save him. Right? I've spoken to a few polar bears. They are not waiting. They have no faith in you. They say to me, you guys can't even take care of your own. Who the hell are you to imagine that you're going to come and save me? That is not how nature works. You attack nature, and nature does the exact same thing that you do. A mosquito comes and bites you, what do you do? It's instinctive, it's immediate. That's why I think this is a better picture. Let me show you a picture that's even better for nature and climate. This beautiful fellow. The supermodel of the natural world. Sleek lines, fur coat. It's like a Lamborghini. People recognize this, especially people from Nepal. What is this picture of? Anyone? No one? Dengue, thank you. It's not just a mosquito, it's dengue. There's a reason I put dengue. Mosquitoes have been historically important to Nepal. It was your southern defense, malaria. But the dengue is important because climate scientists are really thinking about why is the dengue moving northwards, both in South Asia and the Mediterranean. Since 2004, there's been a lot of dengue sort of seemed to re-emerge in Nepal and has been growing in the foothills of Himalayas in Pakistan. It has no business to be there. So much of it comes because people travel and species travel with them and so on and so forth. But when a climate changes not just for you and me, it also changes for species. It becomes more hospitable or not. So this move of vector-borne diseases is one of those important things that is being looked at, right, in what is happening with this. I'm already seeing the picture, so I will move faster. My favorite and most important one, if you remember nothing from what I said, please remember this slide. This beautiful picture is what I think is the cutting edge of climate policy, at least in the next 20, 30 years. And this is at the beginning of the mighty Indus in my country, but sometimes and very often and now increasingly, by the time it comes, the beautiful picture has changed more to something like this. Right? So that is what a flood looks in the middle of the Punjab in Pakistan. And I'll come to this in a minute, but the reason water is important, I won't even go into that. That's all the fresh water in the world, by the way. That's all the fresh water in the world is here. We very often think of water as a renewable resource. It's not, it's a fixed resource. It's one of the most fixed resources on the planet, right? And there's plenty, that's not too little, there's plenty. But if you remember anything from what I say, I hope it is going to be this line. My argument is water is to adaptation what carbon is to mitigation. Why? Think about climate impacts. Think about what happens when the climate changes. And a lot of that story is written in water. Climate changes, water melts, glaciers. Climate changes, water disappears, drought. Climate changes, climate rise, water rises, sea level rise. Climate changes, water falls from the sky like no one's business. Extreme events. So if you're working on climate, you will and be working on water. Just like everyone working on climate was working on energy, whether they knew it or not. Right? That to me is the argument. I was trying to explain these floods in South Asia to people in the US, because floods mean sort of a little water in your basement or whatever, where I am in Massachusetts. And I was finding it difficult. This is the 2010 floods. The 2022 were even bigger, and this year in Pakistan were even bigger. So that map, the blue is the area that was highly covered in water. Right? So I took that map, that blue squiggle, just keep that in mind, and to scale, I put that squiggle to scale on a map of the US, from Vermont down to Florida. I put the same map to scale on a map of Japan. The whole is covered. And this is Pakistan. Don't even try it for India, because that will be continental, right? In scale and size, or for Bangladesh and Am, right? I put it on a map of Europe, Denmark down to Spain, right? Just to explain the extent of what this means. We are used to floods, and floods can even be good things. All of you know that. But the point we are taking is that in the age of impact, we'll have to deal with a different set of problem. This is something I was leading called the Living Indus. I won't talk about it now, maybe in the Q&A. But trying to look at climate as a water problem as a centrally water problem in adaptation, rather than as a carbon management. Now, if climate is going to impact water, it is going to immediately impact food. It will impact food in other ways. But what is food except nature's way of packaging water? Not really, but kind of, right? So I won't even bother you. This room knows this. That's why I'm not going into details. I don't worry about energy because I think the energy transition is real. It cannot be stopped, not by Trump, not by anyone else. The one that is happening. And the reason it is real is because of these two graphs. right? Essentially the price goes down. So from 1970, $100 per kilowatt hour of a solar panel is now down to less than 50 cents. That logic is irrefutable, that will happen. What I worry about is this kit. What I worry about is the nearly 1.5 billion people who are energy poor, whose challenge is not that they're using too much energy, that they are using too little energy, which the climate debate simply sort of sidesteps. And in the age of adaptation, you cannot. Also won't go into, I was part of the World Commission on Energy Transition and Geopolitics, what it does to geopolitics, and we are already seeing that with rare earths and so on and so forth. Mobility, climate people talk about mobility. It is already a different problem for the people you work with and will be in the age of adaptation, because mobility is not a challenge of Tesla. Give me a vehicle, Nepal is doing wonderfully on this, give me a vehicle that reduces energy use. That's a simpler problem because there's a market. The problem you and I face is this mobility problem. People need to move in very large numbers from place A to place B, particularly important for women, and so on and so forth. So I'm just rushing through examples of how climate becomes a non-carbon issue. The carbon issue remains because you have to reduce the carbon so that these things don't happen, but meanwhile you do this. This is actually a picture from Nepal. Infrastructure, amazing work being done on climate and infrastructure, on windows, on insulation, and so on and so forth. But this is Nepal. That's not the infrastructure problem that we face today and will be exacerbated in the age of adaptation. It is dignity in accommodation. It is space. It is all the things you know. I haven't used this picture for nearly 10 years, so this is dedicated to Hemant Das, who reminded me yesterday he remembered this picture from many years ago, so I put it back in. Who can recognize what this is? Anyone? Sorry? Exactly. Thank you. Have you seen it before or not? Either way. So it is waste. Let me give you a closer image of that picture. Right? So that's a closer image of that picture. Let me give you an even closer image of that picture. That's the picture. And what that picture depicts back in 2007 is 2 million plastic beverage bottles, the number used in the US every 5 minutes. In the US, that number has gone up, and we in Pakistan or you in Nepal are now doing as bad a job. You go to Chitwan and it's beautiful, except when on the side you start seeing the plastic bottles pile up. Right? This is from this wonderful artist that we work with called Chris Jordan, who takes environmental data and presents it in art. That was an installation, right? But let me tell you why this becomes important. Certainly had plastic for breakfast, and I'm sure Mani is going to serve us plastic for lunch. There's just no getting out of it. The research is not yet conclusive on what I'm going to say, but it nearly certainly seems that not a single child born on this planet today is born without plastic in their body. Right? Just breathe that in. Just breathe that in. And in a year that was full of disappointments, one of my biggest disappointments of 2024 was the world's inability to come to agreement on the single-use plastic, which was so easy and so doable. If Rwanda can do it, the rest of the world can. Right? So that is what I'm talking about, how the problems change. In some ways, what you guys are doing becomes much more in the frontline ecosystems I won't go into because everyone in this room knows that better. I want to end by two things, Jeff, if I have just a few minutes, because these are important. One is refugees. This gets everyone excited. And I think this is really going to hit us so hard. Again, it is already, if you're in a country like Nepal, everyone is talking about we are losing our young people. If you are living in the US, everyone is talking about where are all these people coming from. Right? I'm not suggesting climate is the only reason. I am suggesting that it is very clear that climate is one of the exacerbating facts. Right? And this is where is an arm. You will see this. When we think of refugees in disasters, we usually think of a single point event. Something nasty happens, a war happens, an earthquake happens, and a lot of people move to one place. What you see with climate mobility or movement is not that. It's much more akin to livelihood, slow seeping out of people, much like, for example, what might have happened in the Green Revolution. People lose livelihoods, people struggle. At some point, the strongest, the youngest, the most ablest sort of leave. The best documented place for that, actually one of the best documented is Bangladesh and the Sundarbans. This is now a 20-year-old story. The change between fresh water and salt water, where they mix, moves literally by millimeters, micromillimeters. But because of that, the shrimp moves. Once the shrimp moves, my rickety boat, if I am a fisher villager, can no longer get to the shrimp. This is well documented now. I start losing, you would again know better on this, I start losing my livelihood. The strong, the young move to Calcutta, to Boston, to wherever. Right? They do so easily if they can. They hide in something like this if they can't. Right? So we need to rethink, and again, I'm making sort of big, bold things. There's much deeper stuff here. I want to use something that is way back from the very start of my career, but it shows the point. I hope people can see colors. This is what's called the parrot beaks region, right? This is in Africa. The parrot's beak is this, if you want to sort of see. You can imagine this is the parrot's head, this is the beak. Date is January 6, 1974. This is Sierra Leone, this is Sierra Leone, this is Guinea. Right? Let me fast forward that. This is 1974. It is not really about climate, but I think it shows us what climate could be. Fast forward to 1999. Right? So it's not only the place where people are going from, it is where they're going to, and much of this migration is not to France and the US. It's within countries and it's within regions. What do you think happened? Right? So you see less cover here. What do you think happened? Anyone? Exactly, and you got it exactly right. The war was in Sierra Leone. The degradation is in Guinea. No one likes war. I don't want war. So I go to where there is no war and I start cutting trees there, not because I'm a bad person, I need fuelwood. We are doing this also on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, similar results, and so on and so forth. So again, reimagination. The last of my points before I shut up, and I wish I did not have to share these pictures because they are utterly unnecessary. This is the biggest tragedy, one of the big tragedies happening in our region, and we are all ignoring it. Extreme heat. I come from Pakistan. In Pakistan, there's a place called Karachi. In Karachi, there used to be 4 seasons. Karachis dispute that. They think there's only one, which is just nastiness, whatever it is. But there used to be 4. Now there's 5. And the 5th season is called extreme heat. I can tell you exactly when it will start. I can tell you exactly when it will end. I can tell you exactly about 300 people are going to die. I can tell you the newspapers are not going to report. And I'll tell you in a minute why that is so. And that belt goes from way earlier than Karachi down to Mumbai and sometimes even to Dhaka. Right? This sort of shift in extreme temperature. It is not temperature that people should be dying at, but that's the question of who's doing the dying. Right? So this is major cities in Pakistan. And it flattens up. So this is, the line is the number of days that is 90 degrees or over years. And it flattens because in Karachi, it's already at 220. So there's only 365 days. At some point, it flattens. Then it is a question not of 90, but 200, and so on and so forth. You can do this for across that band that I was talking about. which is the extreme heat band in South Asia, something we can do about. I will use pictures from Pakistan, but you can pick up the same pictures from India and everywhere else. There is no reason for this type of heat to go unattended because the solution is simple. It's hydration and shade. It's water and trees, right? It's mostly about the concrete jungle that makes it. People shouldn't die at these temperatures, but they do, and the important point is who does the dying. In the case of Karachi, the reason I said that newspapers don't report it is the dying is nearly done by not homeless, but migrant workers from elsewhere in the country who have to work outside very often in construction. Right? Solution again, hydration and shade. This picture, and I apologize, I do have to sort of stop for this. Those are corpses that are unclaimed at the social welfare ED center and are about to go into a mass ditch to grave before they cause disease themselves. Right? Utterly unnecessary. Climate policy has no tools for this. It has to be welfare policy. It has to be development policy. Right? And that is why these two things must start talking to each other much more. So how is climate change changing how we think about climate change? I put those pictures mostly because this was originally done for the UN some years ago. I've sort of played with it. But 4 points to at least think about. I don't have answers, but I do have some thoughts. The first is mainstream climate has to move from thinking of climate as mostly energy to thinking of climate as mostly everything. That's the point I was trying to make. Makes it more difficult, but brings you to the center of the conversation, not to the periphery. Second, we need to move from thinking about maximizing security to minimizing insecurity. Right? Maximizing security so that climate won't change and therefore bad things won't happen. And what that means is maximizing security focuses policies on bad behaviors. I will stop some people's bad behavior, carbon emissions, so that everyone has more security. The general trend of policy for minimizing security works much better when you are incentivizing good behavior, right? The type of stuff you're doing in the communities. I will incentivize good behavior so that insecurities are minimized. Insecurities are different from securities, right? Again, we don't have time to go into it, but it's important. Third thing, moving from thinking international, this may be my most dangerous statement in this room, to thinking global. Note, I have not written thinking local. I think that's too easy. I think that's done. Thinking local is very important. But I think if we put a full stop there, it won't happen. What do I mean? This is the most difficult thing. As international, we think as nations. This made-up concept. And the essential logic of the international negotiation is you will come for your country, I will come for my country, I will seek what is good for my country, you will seek what's good for your country, and somehow what we will agree to will be good for everyone. Simple game theory will tell you, no, that's not going to happen. It's going to be lowest common denominator. Right? And that's what we've been seeing. We shouldn't be surprised. Thinking global to me is not just thinking local, it is thinking as a species. The challenge is human arrogance of thinking ourselves as more special than we are. Our one superpower is adaptation, our other superpower is being destructive to everyone around us. And the final point here, and I'm going to take a bit of a liberty, but I hope you will be kind to me, is moving from thinking of adaptation as a problem to thinking of adaptation as an opportunity. The general way of thinking about adaptation is it is an economic cost. Right? It's difficult, someone has to pay for it. Who will pay for it? The umbrella I was talking about. The opportunity, not easy, I'm not saying it's easy, I'm just saying it's necessary, is to think about adaptation as an opportunity for social justice, for opportunity for fixing things in a better way. Where for the reason I apologize to Partha before this is very new. I may be totally wrong and I may be abusing your ideas, but I was so inspired that I want to at least put that. Another way of thinking about this is what the keynote the first day told. Adaptation is seen as a problem because we are still trapped, as we were so eloquently told, in thinking about income. So adaptation takes away from my GDP to things I think are unproductive. That's why we are uncomfortable. And if we could move to thinking about adaptation as acts of wealth preservation, right? None of this is easy. All of this is important. I don't know who other than you will do it. So thank you and good luck.
Adil, thank you for that dynamic, provocative presentation. I rather suspect that if anybody showed up in this hall this morning and you're feeling a little bit of day 3 conference fatigue, you're not now. I'm sure you've got many questions you'd like to ask Adil, and as he said, he may not give answers, but he'll give thoughts, and I'm sure that there'll be ones that we'll find interesting and provocative. So the floor is open. I'll try to accommodate as many questions as I can. I've got one right up here.
Hello, I'm Prajul from SANDEE. Thank you, Professor Adil, for such a great presentation. I really liked how you presented and a lot of things to learn from your presentation. So something I've been thinking for a long time is, given the difficulty of preserving the environment and preserving the climate in this earth. So I was wondering, this might be a silly question, but I was wondering if what Elon Musk is doing, like looking for Mars or any other planet, would be a better investment. Isn't it? Rather than...
Yes, for Elon Musk, yes.
But humanity as a species. So that was something I was wondering what you are thinking in this respect. Yeah, thank you.
You take a few. Yeah, so that people get a chance to talk, and then I'll come back. Thank you.
I'm Ram Pandit from University of Western Australia. Thank you very much for such a inspiring talk. My question is related to all the elements you presented: climate, biodiversity, pollution, land degradation, food security, and so forth. So when we think about policies and research, you emphasize the research side of things. How do we do research in SANDEE or elsewhere to address these complex problems so that we can at least adapt in some sense in all these respects? Thank you.
Thanks for that. That was a great talk. And you talked about reducing insecurity. In my mind, I always think a lot of my work is very much about just reducing misery and drudgery, because that's kind of the population that I study. But I think this kind of relates to the first question, which is, in a world where the vast majority, and even in most countries where the vast majority of people are poor and impoverished, this may not be a question as much as a reflection. Our politics are completely captured by the interests of the rich, including people like Elon Musk. And the idea that we can all somehow escape, I mean, who gets to escape? Yeah. And how do we... I don't think there's an answer to this question, even when I was asking this, but I think that's the thing that I struggle with, that how do we sort of change this narrative where we are actually able to address, in a democracy, which should be by what the majority of the people think and want, how do we go about really confronting that? Thanks.
Sure. So, Those are excellent questions. Thank you very much. And you know, when someone says they're excellent questions, what they mean is they have no idea what the answer is, and they're just fishing for time. So that's what I'm doing. I have no idea. If you think I'm smart enough to answer those questions, you are wrong. But I think those are the right questions to ask. The Elon Musk, there is a reason why that is happening. And I think this relates also to the last question. So, you know, apart from the sort of funny part of it, for Elon Musk, it makes very much sense. And not just Elon, but the super rich, this is a different talk. There's something happening in wealth which we should be very concerned about, right? Elon Musk's personal wealth that he can write a check for is now greater than the entire GDP. The entire GDP of a country that has nuclear weapons, the fifth biggest army in the world, and 250 million people. When you get historically that sort of wealth concentrated anywhere, people start having ideas. They start having ideas of countries of their own and militaries of their own, and why don't I have a nuclear weapon when, you know, and so lots of things happen, and you're seeing this happening in that crust of the obnoxiously rich. I'm not using obnoxious in a moral sense. It is just an amount of wealth that you cannot imagine, even as countries, right? So things happen. They start thinking of living forever, right? They're putting a lot of money into that. They start thinking of creating their own countries. There are at least 5 applications to the UN to create island states as countries for the super rich, right? They think starting of going and doing that. Historically, history has a way of dealing with that, which is violence and so on and so forth. But this idea that we will mess this planet and then let's go and colonize another, I think comes from a certain arrogance that behooves Mr. Musk much more than it behooves you or me. Because when that rocket ship leaves, I don't think you and I are going to be on it. Right? So I don't know if it was Bertrand Russell or not, someone will tell me, but I kind of recall it was Bertrand Russell who, when told that people were going to the moon, responded, have we solved all the problems on this planet that we're going to go and search for another? So if we are going to use the planet as a tissue to use and discard once it's over, we'll find another. Wake me up when you find the planet. Until then, I'm going to try to work on this one, is my sense. And I'll come to the other part of this just in a minute. On the policy question, that silly looking slide with the umbrella, is where, and this is the first time I'm using that slide ever, so I literally made it up sitting here as I was listening to everyone. I think that's part of this question of where do the V and policy meet. Mitigation policy, I'm using general terms, generally has been about investment policies, right? What can we invest in that will help reduce carbon? That can be a Tesla by investing in technology. That can be going back to old traditions and finding less carbon intensive. But if you think about a lot of what we do, it has been in that mold. We'll make some investment, and that technological, social, whatever investment will yield us something. The reason I'm still upbeat on adaptation is essentially development policy. I'm not a fan of adaptation fund because I want that to be in every development policy. I challenge you, show me a good adaptation project, and I will show you a good development project. There is an opportunity, I don't know if we'll take it or not, to use adaptation to bend that curve of, call it welfare policy, social policy, justice, social justice, whatever. I do not know if it will be taken as such, but that's the opportunity. The loss and damage, and this is why the policy approach of funds doesn't work. There isn't enough money in the whole planet, even with Mr. Musk, to deal with loss and damage. Because loss and damage is necessarily disaster relief. At the moment my home is being swept away in a flood, your solar panel does nothing for me, God's sake. Right? I actually tweeted, the World Bank head in Pakistan had said we will double the number of solar panels right after the floods, and I kind of sarcastically tweeted, what will people do with it? Use it like boats? Right? At that point, that's what I need. So the point is, we want to minimize that loss and damage, because it is, otherwise you will constantly be throwing money into that. That's the type of research then that we could do, particularly in adaptation. How can we make adaptation policy? It won't, the reason I speak to you with this, I hope, with some humility that I want answers, that answer cannot come from the climate people. They are my friends, they are my people, but our language is carbon. We are good at carbon. We need people who can understand water and livelihoods to help create that, because it won't come only from that crowd. I think that crowd is willing to hear to you, if you will. On the last question, you are exactly right, but I'll give you two examples of why we in developing countries also need to be somewhat more careful. This is why I keep saying we need to go back to global. People who work on local need to think about global. Right? So net zero, people know net zero? Right? We all love net zero. What is not to like about net zero? I have very mixed feelings about net zero, because net zero, this idea that we will make our city, our community, my university has a net zero policy. By 2035, we'll be net zero, right? Meaning I will make my own emissions zero. But that can lead very easily to a fortress world. Stockholm will be not net zero. Boston will be net zero, mostly by exporting its pollution and problems elsewhere. It's kind of the reason why rich communities, I find it funny, rich communities in any country are the cleanest. Poor communities are the dirtiest. And my mind says, if they're producing more waste, where does it go, right? And the answer is very simple. It goes somewhere else, right? So this is the point. And I think, for example, I'm going to say something, I hope, why not? This is controversial. Many of our countries at the government level, and even people like me, love to say we don't contribute that much to climate change, right? So in Pakistan, we say we are less than 1%. And I remind them that we are still number 43, actually, because most are even less than 1%, right? And so we hide behind this fact that because we contribute very little, we have no responsibility for this, and somehow we are waiting for those who have contributed more emissions to come. A, I have no faith that they will come. B, the rich in my country pollutes as much as Boston, right? So if I'm serious about injustice, then I have to see injustice not only between countries, but within countries. So you're right, it doesn't have an answer, but that politics has to change somehow, or at least has to be pushed, right? That's the agenda for the next 25 years of SANDEE. So.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you so much for a really, really amazing talk. I'm Akriti Vanchu from IRI Ecological Solutions in New Delhi. I had a question that, you talked about heat and extreme heat towards the end and how that requires adaptation. But the adaptation to heat to a large extent will also lead to emissions, whether you're looking at electricity demand, whether you look at the emissions from cooling itself. And there will be other adaptation solutions which will have emissions attached to it. So how do we balance those two?
Thank you.
This is Joyashri, and so I was just thinking that in your whole discourse, how would you position two terms which I have not heard from you yet, is about the limits to adaptation and also the carbon capture, so that the carbon budget is increased and the carbon capture is going to be in the not only the pollution we are exporting, but also not we means, the richer exporting, but then how you are pushing it to not in my backyard, but to the Africa and South Asia.
One thing I appreciate is you're keeping your questions very focused. There are a lot of people who want to ask questions, so the more focused.
You're politely saying I should keep my answers short. No, I will.
Well, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm Paul Mazumdar. I teach at Florida International University, which is in Miami. I'm also from Bangladesh, so I see climate risk in a very different perspective. And one of the things that you're talking about, the making adaptation more into the development agenda, do you think it's on the policy folks like us to come and propose more innovative pro-adaptive development agenda. I will give you an example. In Bangladesh, we used to lose a lot of people for cyclones. All in the coastal belt, now you have schools, which are basically cyclone shelters. You have like a first 3 floor is huge pillars. And it looks ridiculous in the summertime, why these pillars are so tall. So when you're building like a port, when you're building stadiums, when you're building schools, universities, should we keep climate adaptation in mind all the time? Thank you.
Another question?
You can take another because they're actually similar. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm Yamini Gut, and my question is inspired by that slide that you showed with the plastic waste.
That's Heman's slide now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in our part of the world, while cities do have municipal systems of waste collection, recycling, or disposal, not perhaps in the most efficient way, but rural areas lack these. And so while plastic packaging and products and of course then plastic waste has found its way to rural areas, there is no proper way of managing that waste. So like you found plastic waste in Chitwan, you see a lot of rural waste if you, plastic waste strewn about if you travel in rural areas. So my question is that where populations are more worried about where their next meal is going to come from, how do you get them to worry about not generating waste?
Yeah. Thank you. The reason I said we could take more is because there's a confluence in those questions. Extreme heat, I'll be extreme because the question was about extreme. At some point, we'll have to make some distinctions about good emissions and bad emissions, right? And so putting adaptation to this test that it has to have 0 emissions, I think those who have high emissions, their first responsibility is emissions. Right? So I know this is stark, but it is a reality. If you are going to freeze emissions of every country at where they are, that is just fundamentally unjust. It's kind of like energy. So I think there has to be a distribution of that, and then there should be a cost benefit. That is there enough adaptation benefit to justify whatever those emissions are, and you're exactly right, many of them will. But the serious internal politics, and there are again people in this room who know this well, I hope I'm amongst friends, so I'm being absolutely honest. Adaptation has been resisted by many of my climate friends. I was on IPCC on the mitigation, and Salimul Haq used to be on adaptation. We used to have these late night conversations, and even I would say to him, yaar, don't talk too much about adaptation because they will think we can just do nothing and eventually adapt. Right? So there is this underlying, it's not bad people. There is this concern that when developing countries talk about adaptation, all they really want is development money. And so sometimes in these funds you get, a climate project is not going to go ahead unless it shows some carbon benefit. In WWF Pakistan, we just got a $77 million, the first time GCF has given a adaptation money for entirely water. The whole proposal had no carbon mention. It's called Recharge Pakistan and Recharging. But the uphill battle was, it was a 12-year battle. Because the mindset is that adaptation is okay as long as you can show me some emission benefit or at least not an emission loss. And what I'm saying is, emission is a currency. It's like dollars. And we should also be doing cost benefit on emissions, right? And where they are happening and whatever difficult. On the limits to adaptation, partly this is exactly what it is, and you are exactly right. I won't go into it, but both those questions. Remember that adaptation diagram I had with the umbrella? The thing I said fleetingly, let me say again because it is important and related to this. Adaptation is the failure of mitigation, but it is not the opposite of mitigation. So a world that is only adapting is not the world I want to be. So those where the emissions are greater have to reduce it. And this idea that we'll trade it with the poor is a difficult and dangerous one. So the less you mitigate, the more you will have to adapt, and that will be that will be the problem. And on the last two questions, they're actually both about sort of, how do we put adaptation in policy, whether it's about plastic bottles or whether what our friend from Florida and via Bangladesh said. So the answer to your question is yes, it is your responsibility. It's no one else's responsibility because my carbon counting self is incapable of coming up with those policies. This is partly why I would like to see adaptation as part of development policy rather than a subset of climate policy. Right? It should be, as we have done with other things like gender and etc., a test you apply to every development enterprise that you do, eventually. Right? And that is the push that I'm talking about. Same about plastic bottles. Right? So no, I will not tell the communities I was spending last 5 days ago, the Tharu communities in Chitwan to stop using plastic bottles until I have given them a better system of water availability and distribution. Right? I'm not going to go and give them these fancy bottles with my logo. Use these instead. So that is what I'm saying, that I'm talking about deeper integration of welfare and development economics into this rather than those superficial things. I hope I got the point across.
So the microphone's going back to this side of the room, okay? Not over there, over here. The microphones go over to this side of the room. So who do we have on this side of the room? Okay. Here. There, here. Okay, so microphone here. Second microphone. Come over here.
Thank you. This is Sajjad. And I thought the issue of, you had one point, international getting replaced by global, and somehow decided to ignore the local part. But your illustration suggests that the better fit would be the right balance between local and global, having different tiers for which you define the local and global. Thank you.
Yeah. My name is Seema Purushothaman. I have a question as a teacher. I have been teaching for years. First, teaching sustainability of human society as a conservation project. And over time, we changed it into an economic project. We said conservation and economic growth will go together in sustainable development. And of late, I am beginning to teach it as a social project. I thought you are agreeing with me. I would like to know that.
Thank you, Seema. And last question here, Gunnar.
Gunnar Schelin, Environment for Development. I'm going to ask you kind of a meta question here. So many of us are environmental economists, some of us are managers allocating our research money. So here's a question to you, because you've mentioned cost-benefit analysis. Apply this to our own research. So there are a zillion things we could do research on in this climate sphere. It's so urgent. Where could we make the best use of our limited skills and research money to make a difference?
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Good questions again, and you know what that means. Can I please ask, can you bring back my slide? Because I will, at the end, I want to also, Jeff, right at the end, give me just a minute to put one thing, right? So just please leave that there, and we'll come to this. These will be 3 quick questions because the answer to all 3 is yes. The answer to first is no. I knew that local would come and bite me. I knew that consciously, and I hope I'm amongst friends and you will indulge me. I purposely put global as species rather than local. Local is the same thing as territorial. I'll tell you who's very local, Mr. Trump. Local is also putting borders. And if you localize so much, this whole world of localization and international assistance, a lot of us worry about. What it really means is, why am I sending money to Nepal, and why am I not using it in Boston? And that's why my challenge is much bigger. That does not mean I'm totally with you on the importance of local. But I think local has to now stand up and see itself as part of global. I also, unfortunately, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the conceptual battles will be between local and local. I talked about the Pakistan 2022 floods. The time Pakistan floods were happening, what else was happening? There were fires in Canada. There was a drought in Africa, exactly same time. There was extreme heat across both Europe and California. There was fire and drought in Australia. Right? I'm a politician. Who do I give money to? I think the right thing is I should give money to my neighbor first. Right? And this becomes really, really important. The implication of this, I thought this would be a short answer, but give me a minute. I'll throw these numbers again because this is the right room. It's not that compassion goes down, but the need for compassion goes up. Right? And then the logic of me first becomes very dominant. I'll go back to the 22 floods in Pakistan. So there was a lot of international attention. Guterres came in. Partly it was because this was the first thing where the trigger, you could identify the fingerprint of climate change much more stronger on attribution. Right? So there was a lot of international attention. So lots of things happened. The World Bank led a study of valuation. They should have come to SANDEE. Because that's where the expertise was, but the World Bank led on, what was the total estimate of the cost of the floods to the national economy, to poor people, to agriculture, to livestock, to everything. Now, the World Bank, we know, is not very good at math, but they came up with a number of 32 billion. Then they revised it, and they came out to 28. Let's even assume it's not that, it's something else. Okay? There's a lot of international attention, if you remember, much more than the current floods. Then there's a major donor conference in Geneva, and countries come in with Guterres to sort of say if they can raise money for this. And I think it wasn't 18, it was 12 billion that was pledged. Right? Of the 12 billion that was pledged, about 6 point some billion actually came in. Of the 6 point some billion, I think my numbers yesterday, Heyman, were slightly off, I checked. Of that, about 4 billion was not actual aid, it was just foreign exchange being put in Pakistan banks so that the foreign reserve could be bolstered up and we wouldn't get into IMF. So this was from the Gulf countries, went back. That leaves you with 2 billion, that's not chump change, and some very good things were done by it. My question to SANDEE is this. So if the bank's assessment was even nearly true, and 2 billion, even if it actually got to people, which is certainly not what happened, never happens, who paid the remaining 18 billion? Right? Because that's a real cost. Someone's house has been swept away. And the answer is, what is always the answer in every place? The poor will always pay. Right? The raineth, raineth every day. The poor will always pay. It's not because nature is unjust or God is unfair. It's capacities. Right? So what do I do if my home has been swept away? I take the one piece of cattle that was left, I sell it and build it back because I can't just stay there. I take whatever I was saving for my daughter's wedding and I put it on that. So I keep insisting to various governments that we should count actual adaptation money being spent by poor people because they have to adapt every day. They don't wait for these policies, they just have to do it every way. This is going to be heartbreaking, but now the evidence is fairly in. I've done some work for the Malala Fund and now the others have. One of it's a very small level, but it has happened. In many parts hit by the floods, there was this thing that girls were taken out of school first, and the marriage of underage girls ticked slightly up. It is not because their parents don't love them, right? If I'm going to see a flood after a flood after a flood, one of the best things I think I can do for my daughter is to send her away somewhere, right? So what I'm saying is people make real decisions on these things. And that is the type of things that me in my carbon world are not going to happen. That again goes to, sorry for sort of I made this much longer, on Simi, you are exactly right. Yes, I do agree with you. If I have to push you, I would change social to societal. right? Because social can sometimes get sort of sidelined on the periphery, but societal might even be, but yes, exactly with you, and it's the same journey. I have no idea how to do this. That's not an easy job, right? Because the resources are limited, the things are, but putting some fields on every project that says, is this linking to this type of thing? So rather than saying, I would say, rather than making a separate pot for adaptation and everything else, I would much rather see that integrated in everything. Yesterday, there was some presentations which were pushing SANDEE should do a lot of policy and stuff. Even though I'm a policy person, I've always believed that not to be true. Good policy needs good research before it becomes good policy, right? So do not sacrifice rigorous research for the sake of convenient, pertinent, immediate policy would be my little plea.
Great, thank you. We have time for 2 quick questions. Going to have Hina the first one, and then the person in the far back. And unfortunately, that'll have to be the end, but we have a break after, actually, we have a break not right after this, but after David speaks, I believe. So there'll be time to follow up with Adil. Okay, so first one here.
Thank you so much for a very wonderful presentation. My name is Arjun Dakal, based in Kathmandu. I'm an environmentalist, basically. My 2 questions. One, being a South Asian under the third pole, Himalayas. Himalayas is under the 3 different, especially the glacier of Himalayas are under the 3 different type of threat: climate change, regional air pollution like black carbon, and there are some cases of plastic pollutions that thoroughly the dust goes to the Himalayas and increase the albedo effect. That what could be the challenge and the options for the saving the lives and water security of these millions of people under the Himalayas in South Asia and Southeast Asia? Number 1. Number 2 questions.
Sir, excuse me.
I just take
sir,
I just take opportunity to ask a question with WWF.
Very
the
quick.
upcoming pandemic on antibiotic resistance in ecology, antibiotic resistance in ecology and the human well-being. What could be the strategy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Adil, for the wonderful, very enlightening presentation, as always. I'm Hina Aslam from Australian National University and STPI, and from Pakistan originally. I have got 2 questions. First, in the local context.
I think he's allowing you only one.
I'll be very quick.
Okay.
So one in the local context, one in the global context. For the local adaptation purpose, there's a lot of potential and research going on in the role of indigenous knowledge for the adaptation. So do your perspective on that. On the global context, for adaptation, we are a lot more focusing on mitigation options, R&D, innovations. So let's say if given an example of SAF, which is Sustainable Aviation Fuel, until or unless it's going to benefit a local person flying from Canberra to all the way to Kathmandu on a better price, it will not incentivize or make any impact in terms of behavior, in terms of adaptation, or finding out the solution. So just to think about one of the example, but many others. So just your perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Adil, we have 3 minutes left, and you said you wanted a minute at the end to show something. So if you
I have
could
2.
handle these in 2. Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, I kind of agree with the sentiment of both, and can I please, yes. So I really agree with the right, both of your examples, the Himalaya and antibiotic resistance, those are the type of things we will see. I am not smart enough or wise enough to know all the things that will happen. But when you change a major system at the scale that we have changed it with climate change, you are going to see surprises. And once you know where they're going, that's where policy should go. That would be my extent. I didn't fully get the question, but that would be. Same with the indigenous knowledge. I will go back to again, I'm hoping I'm amongst friends. We sometimes slap these terms as sort of, just feel-good slogans. And I think we need to sort of also seriously think about what we mean by them. And I think what we mean in this room by them is making the lives and livelihoods of communities and indigenous people better. And sometimes that will happen when you speak to themselves by giving them the opportunity to build on their indigenous traditions. Sometimes it will happen by their desire to actually have a tap. right? And both should be respected. And I won't go into your example, but especially at the carbon level, sometimes it becomes that feel good. Have we talked to two people who were indigenous? Do I have one person on my board who is so? And I think again, SANDEE has a responsibility and ability to lead from there. What I want to end with, and I don't know if Mani is here, I'm hoping not because I'm probably breaking a rule, okay? So look the other way, Mani. I don't know if songs are allowed at economics meetings, but let me end with one. No, I will not sing, but it highlights, I think it is an ode to the mighty Indus, but it's also an ode to the Ganga and to the Brahmaputra and to the Niryani, and it highlights the point I was talking about on water.
दरिया ओ दरिया
River, oh river.
पानी तेरे डूंगे
Your waters are deep.
तू सदा प्यू माय सा तेरे पूंगे
You are my father, you are my mother, I
तू
come
सदा
from
प्यू माय सा तेरे पूंगे दरिया ओ दरिया जंगलां दे सावें दरिया ओ दरिया जंगलां दे सावें
River, oh river, you give us the shade of the
trees. खुशी साडे नामे
Give me some happiness, give me some shade.
दरिया ओ दरिया पानी तेरे डूंगे तू साडा प्यू माय सा तेरे पूंगे तू साडा प्यू माय सा तेरे पूंगे.
That's how I think you bring in this knowledge in, by listening to people rather than applying our views of what they want. Thank you very much for enduring me.
Adil, thank you for getting the final day of our conference off to a supercharged start. So let's carry this energy through the remainder of the day. And at this point, I hand the microphone back to Manashri.
Thank you, Professor Nazam, for the insightful keynote address. And thank you, Professor Vincent, for the excellent moderation. May I request Dr. Mani Nepal to kindly be on the stage to hand over the token of love to Professor Nazam. And I'd like to again call Professor Nazam back to the stage.
I was hoping I would get one of those. Thank you. Thank you, Mani. Thank you. And congratulations, 25. Wow. Okay. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, to formally close this group session, I would like to invite Dr. David Thomas Porter, Head of Regional Action and Global Advocacy at ICIMOD. Dr. Porter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. On day 3 of our SANDEE at 25 conference, I feel like I should probably do this vote of thanks through a song or dance, but unfortunately, I haven't prepared any, so I'm just going to have to do it the old-fashioned way and give my thanks to all the people who've been involved in making this rather impressive event such a success. And this also isn't the end of the day, of course, but it's the last opportunity we've got together as a full group just to acknowledge and recognise the contributions that so many people have made to make the conference a success. Firstly, it wouldn't have been possible to have this conference without all of you attending participants, presenters, discussants, session chairs, moderators, and panelists. And I think all of you together have helped contribute to a really rich and informative discussion and celebration of SANDEE's performance and progress over the last 25 years. I'd also like to extend a warm thank you to our highly regarded keynote speakers who've taken time out of their busy schedules to join us in this event and our celebration. So thank you very much to Sir Partha Dasgupta, Dr. Ruth Mainton-Dick, Professor Nazam and Professor Powdell. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We had 3 really important committees working on developing this event over the last year, in fact. The work to start planning this conference started in January, and I'd like to really thank Professor Samanathan, who was leading the scientific committee. Thank you very much. That committee did a wonderful job in screening the huge number of interesting proposals that we received for papers, and also screened the panels for the conferences and the committee. So thank you. Our Deputy Director General at ICIMOD, Isabella Koziel, co-chaired with Professor Mukhopadhyay and also with the support of Mani Nepal, the organising committee, which was the key committee bringing together all the logistics and the planning for this event, which was actually a colossal job. And I need not mention this conference was supposed to be happening in an entirely different location up until a few months ago when we had to change the plans due to the situation in Kathmandu. And that committee led on a swift replan, which caused some grey hairs in heads, but as you can see was a big success. So thank you very much. Our advisory committee was led by the ICIMOD Director General, Dr. Pema Gyamcho, and that committee provided the overall insight and guidance to support the strategic direction of the process. So thank you very much there as well. I have to thank the core team, of course, Mani, Tanvir and Manashri, as well as our other SANDEE advisors, and especially Professor Mukhopadhyay and Professor Anamal Haq, who met virtually a number of times to work through the day-to-day grit of planning for this event and for coordinating all of the conference facilities, logistics, and technical issues together. Our ICIMOD Travel and Hospitality Unit also need to be recognised here because they have worked tirelessly to make sure that all flights and accommodation have been in place despite the rebooking that we had to do halfway through the process, so thank you to them. Our comms colleagues here, I think, have done an absolutely fantastic job. I've been really impressed with the comms and media output from this event, and we haven't even finished yet. It's been really good, not just on social media, but across a range of the countries where SANDEE is active. So thank you very much to Vanessa, who's been leading that team, as well as to Jabba and Ankit and the other comms support staff who've been working there. And also, they led on developing the Reflections and Recollections book, which I'm sure you'll all agree is going to be a really good permanent testament to this event and what we've achieved here. Our directorate and broader ICIMOD colleagues, I'd like to thank for being involved in taking part in the events, speaking in some of the joint sessions, and also contributing to the discussion and debate. So thank you more broadly to our wider ICIMOD colleagues. It wouldn't be possible to have this event without the support of our extremely generous donors, and particularly IDRC, CEDA, as well as our ICIMOD regional member countries have all contributed the funding to make SANDEE a success over the years, but also this event particularly. And I think that's really important to recognise and to realise that funding is what is making SANDEE possible in the longer term. We also have an independent evaluation unit, and I'd just like to say a note of thanks to them as well for working on the key statistics of the SANDEE independent evaluation. Quite a lot of the information and data from that evaluation has been included in some of the conference events so far, including the Reflections event that I was supporting on the first day. And if you haven't looked at that evaluation work yet, it is really worth taking a look because it really summarizes quantifiably, there is a quantifiable change and improvement that SANDEE is contributing to in terms of research in the region. And I think having evidence of that is super important. Thank you also to the Hotel Himalaya and also to Vivanta, as well as all the volunteers who've been supporting the conference through these 3 days, as well as the support staff who've made sure that everything has run smoothly. We've been fully fueled on tea and coffee and that we've been fed on time. So thank you to them as well. And I just want to end my thanks to come back to the Secretariat, the SANDEE Secretariat. Mani Nepal has led an absolutely fantastic job in making this really very large event a success. So thank you, Mani. Of course, there are a large number of people who are needed to make something like this successful, but I think having leadership and a clear vision to drive everything forwards is also absolutely essential. So thank you very much. I would like to close the vote of thanks there and pass back to my colleagues to carry on with the day. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And we would also like to thank you for your excellent leadership as the head of Regional Action and Global Advocacy at ICIMOD. We now have come to the end of formal sessions, but the day's events and the day's agendas still continue. Immediately after the tea-coffee break here today, we will have 3 panel sessions taking place parallelly in the following halls: Himalaya Grand Ballroom, this particular hall, Rato Baitak, and Skyline. Like yesterday, after lunch, we will have 5 parallel sessions in 5 halls. Our volunteers will be happy to assist you if any directions are required. Before we conclude, I also have a few Secretariat announcements. Delegates who are yet to receive your reimbursements are kindly requested to contact the reimbursement desk. And if the desk is unattended, please directly contact me or Ali via email or WhatsApp. We also hope every one of you have received your conference jackets. If not, you can contact at the registration desk. And before the tea coffee, we will be again going for a group photo with your jackets if you have at hand. We hope you do. And the photo shoot will be followed by the tea coffee break. Finally, we hope this conference has been a fruitful experience and has sparked ideas, collaborations, and conversations that will continue beyond these 3 days. Thank you and have a wonderful day ahead. And we request everyone to gather at the ground outside where the tea coffee break is happening in front of the temple. Thank you.